Hello, everybody. My name is Wilton Reisenhoover, and I'm the creator of Fintel, and I'm going to be doing a webinar today, a demo of Fintel, for those of you who are on right now. It's just about a minute after we're supposed to start, so thanks for showing up here. If you guys have questions, jump in the chat. I can see somebody's already in there, so that's great. I don't really use the raise hands or the polls all that much. So if you have questions, put them in the chat and I will address them when I can. And normally what I do is I go through kind of all of the features. This time I would like you to tell me or share with me your requests for features, because it's getting to the point now where there's so much data that I can't actually cover everything in the 1 hour that we have allotted. So, you know, it might be helpful for you guys to tell me what you think you would like to see, and I can make sure to hit that in a different order. And that will also make this webinar a little bit different than all the other webinars that we do. So just kind of keep that in mind. So if I don't hear anything from you, I'll go ahead and get started on some stuff that I think is interesting. And typically, okay, funds flow data. That was going to be one of the things that I talked about, because that's kind of pretty much new. It's a new data set that we have, or a new data set that we've developed. So I will talk about that for sure. Okay, so I'm going to move this video up. So it looks like I'm going to be looking down now, or up at you, and my camera's down here. So, and then I'm going to share my screen with you. Yes, question about short squeezing. Okay, these are good questions. So let me share my screen. This desktop one. Okay. Good questions already. Okay, so you should be able to see my screen now, my Fintel dashboard. Can you guys confirm that, please? And then I will proceed. Okay, I'll just assume that you guys could see. Okay, great. Okay, so all right. So let me just go ahead, and it looks like there's some new people here. So I'm going to go ahead and run through the dashboard just real quickly. I see that there's some people that have been on here before. So I know there's a lot of review, but this is basically my dashboard, and you should have a dashboard that looks a lot like this, except for the fact that there's different stocks. Okay. And also I generally say, don't take any existence or non-existence of a stock on my dashboard as a reason why you should be buying or selling something. I just track a lot of stuff, and there's no opinion on any of these stocks that are on this list. So don't think that because I have Alcoa aluminum on here, I believe it to be a good purchase or a bad purchase. It's just not that. It's just don't read anything into this. But with that in mind, let me just run you through the dashboard. This is the overview right here. If you want to put stocks or your tickers on your overview, you can just stick them in here and they'll show up. If you go browsing around Fintel for a while, what it's going to do is it's going to track the tickers you're going to look at, and it's going to ask you at some point if you want to add this. This is just a little way that we can kind of help you, add stuff to your dashboard. You can always say no if you don't want to. From here, you have news. So we get a lot of news. You can kind of see what's going on here. We've got SEC filings. So these are all the SEC filings for these stocks up here on the dashboard. So we track this, and then we put all the news and stuff related to that here on this dashboard. Then we have insider transactions here. Let me zoom this up a little bit here. We have ownership transactions. So these are basically the difference between insider and ownership transaction is that insiders are specific types of people, typically, officers of the company. And owners are typically not really related to the company. These might be hedge funds or portfolio managers, things like that. But this information is really important because it gives you a sense of what the sentiment is, both from the ownership perspective and from the insider perspective. So these are things that we track. I'm going to jump over here to the left-hand side here. We've got alerts as well. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But you can subscribe to alerts of various types, and we will email you, or we will put it in here if you don't like the email. And then if you also want to go down this left side bar here, you're going to find a lot more kind of detail of this. So for example, the news here, you can get more news on your dashboard by going here. So this is going to give you a little bit more detail. It's going to give you some images and more pages. And this is the SEC filings for your dashboard, portfolio companies, more extensive, as you can see here. And then insider transactions here. So it's basically, this is kind of like a drill down. If you were to go over to your overview, back to this page, and then click on the see more, what you'll find is that you end up on this tab over here. So this is basically an expanded view of what's on the overview page. I'm going to skip over the ownership and institutions. I'm going to jump down here to your settings because this is important. In addition to creating just a general purpose kind of like follow list, you can also create stock lists. So this is basically a watch list, right? You can create a category or you can create a list and you can add stuff to it. So I can say, come over here and say, let me add what's a technology company here that I haven't thought of for a while. Snap, Tesla. Let's talk about Apple. I can add Apple. And it's going to give me trouble today, isn't it? Why is AAPL not showing up? Oh, here we go. Here's Apple Inc. Okay. Now these are other listings for Apple in other countries. Just FYI, that's what this means. These if a company is not, if the ticker is not a US ticker, then we'll put the country code in front of it, and that's pretty standard if you're talking about foreign websites that provide data on foreign tickers. But here's Apple. I'll add this to the list. Now, if you come back over to the overview, Apple should show up here right away. There it is. I can also notice I have 4 stock lists here, 1, 2, 3, 4. I can also filter this on those stock lists as well. So if I want to just look at my technology stock list, I can go here. If I want to look at my kind of my default follow list, I can go here. So we provide some ways to categorize stuff. Okay. I hope that makes sense. If you want to delete something from your stock list or from your dashboard, then you're going to come to stock lists and you're going to go to the list itself and you're going to mouse over this page and you're going to click on the X that says remove from the list. Okay. It's that simple. You can also, if you want to delete everything from the list, you can say remove all items from the list, or you can actually delete the list. So we've had people that have signed up who have created stock lists of 100 or 200 or more, and then they find themselves in a situation where they're getting a lot of emails, and this is a way to clean out an entire list right here. Okay, questions? No questions so far? All right. Now on these alerts, we're kind of transitioning on the alerts, right? We have this kind of old way of doing things, and we have this new way of doing things. We're in the process of doing a lot of engineering on this. When you sign up to follow a stock, you're going to be automatically subscribed to a kind of a set of emails, a set of alerts that we have curated for you. These are alerts that I believe to be important. And you can either turn that curated list on or you can turn it off. Okay. So for example, here I have Alcoa. I can turn off the alerts for Alcoa, or I can turn them back on, and so forth. And that's called the legacy company alerts, right? And these are tied to a specific stock. And those alerts include things like an 8K. An 8K is an important filing that includes like earnings releases and things like that. Every company must file an 8K if there's any kind of material change or material news in the thing. It's better than reading the news because it's directly from the mouth of the company management. Insider trades. So if the CEO sells a bunch of stocks, you're going to get an email. There's a significant investor changes in ownership. So if there's a 13D or a 13G or a fund, discloses a position, you're going to get an email. There's an S1, you'll get an email if there's an S1 filing, which is a shelf statement, which means that if there's a secondary offering, I see, someone just asked about secondary offerings. So secondary offerings can oftentimes, almost always, result in dilution, and that oftentimes causes the share price to drop. So there's important filings and important things that we will notify you, but you can't change that list right now. So you're going to either get them or you're not going to get them. Another approach to this, and this is for stuff that you're following. There are oftentimes people who want to be notified for general purpose type alerts. And so we have these kind of global alerts. So for example, if you want to track S1 filings, you want to know anytime there's an IPO coming or a secondary offering, you can just turn on this alert and you'll get an email anytime there's an S1 filing. If you want to get an email anytime there's an insider purchase, you can turn this on. It doesn't matter what company it is. It doesn't matter if you're following them or not. You can get an email for any insider purchase that's over $100,000. That's basically an open market purchase. So this is what the global alert says. This is going to give you, it's going to send you an email anytime the criteria hits. Okay. Now, we can create more of these. So if you have an interest in getting, like, for example, we just created this global alert for S3 filings last week based on somebody's request. So if you have a request and you want to be alerted if there's a 13D or a 13G or something like that, please tell me what it is. And I will be happy to add this to the list. And then everybody can kind of profit and enjoy the benefits of your thinking. Okay, so that's just kind of my general offer to you. Now you can also follow funds and investors, and we'll talk more about that at some point. But in addition to following companies, you can follow investors, and that's what the legacy investor alerts is. So for example, I follow Baker Brothers, I follow Baupost. These are all well-known hedge funds, and I follow them. So if there's things that they do, such as file a 13D that they've taken a position in a company, I get an email alert for that. Okay, so that's what this is. Again, we're kind of in the process of transitioning. The UI is not real great, but it's important for you to understand what these alerts are. Okay, if there's no questions about that, I'm going to move on and start talking about some of the data that we have. Okay, let me just see if I can. Okay, so I have noticed when there's a secondary offerings, you don't update the total outstanding stock, which throws off the institution ownership percentage higher. So that is something that should be fixed now. We signed a deal with Capital IQ a month and a half ago, and that should be, and that data includes shares outstanding, and that includes float and a bunch of other stuff, accounting data, for example, revenue, things like that. So there were some snafus when we turned it on initially, but I think they're all ironed out now. And I think if there's a secondary offering, we should get the updates within a day or two now on the shares outstanding. So I would like you to kind of monitor this and see if it looks a little bit better than what you think it might be. And if it still looks funny, after you've spent a couple days or weeks looking at these things, then let us know and we'll investigate it. But I do believe now that our shares outstanding and our float should be updated pretty quickly after their secondary offerings. Okay, how do you add investors to this list? That's a good question. What you're going to do is you're going to go find the investor, Baker Brothers. Baker Brothers, for some reason, doesn't actually spell their second name with THES. They spell it with bros. You go to the fund, you go to the institution, and you're going to say, add this fund to your dashboard. This is already on my dashboard, so it says remove this fund, but this is how you add an investor to the list. Okay? You go to the fund itself, to the fund page that's got a URL that says I in it, and then you're going to you'll add it. There'll be a button here. Okay. Okay. So let's go back to my dashboard. 13D and G global, this would be great. Okay. So send in a request and we'll work on that. How often institutional ownership is available? So it's a good question. Let me go back and make sure. There's some other questions here. Okay. So there's the answer to your question is the ownership data is updated. It varies. Okay. So 13F filings are required 45 days after the end of every calendar quarter. Okay. We get them from the SEC as soon as the SEC arrives, and we literally ping the SEC every 60 seconds for new filings. But the data is delayed. So 13F filings are lagged by 45 days. Import filings are lagged by sometimes 60 days. 13G filings can be just annual, like Vanguard files the 13G filings. They're due on February 15th, but 13D, D as in Delta, are required 10 days after a transaction. So it varies. And additionally, 13F filings, they don't report transactions, they report their positions as of the last day of the quarter. So you don't get to see transaction level detail in there. It's just, what do they have today? And we can kind of infer what changed over the quarter by looking at the prior filing, but you can't say that it took 1 million transactions to get to the change that they have, or just one transaction. Okay. Also, how long do they have to report buying as well as selling? I don't know what that means. They just report, whatever the filing requires of them. Now, let me go back to, there's a couple of questions that were earlier here. Let's talk about the funds flow data. Now that we're done with the dashboard, I'm going to start digging into some of the data that we have here. I'm going to jump on, let's jump on Zoom, since we're using Zoom right now. And let's take a look at this ownership data here. I'm going to come over here and click on owners. So this is basically going to tell me all of the ownership data that we have for Zoom. And we're able to, because of the data that's included in the import filings, we're actually able to pull short interest out of these as well. The newer filings require funds that have short positions to actually report those as short positions. So we're starting to pull more of that out. But you can see here that there's 1,500 institutional owners that have disclosed positions. 1,507 are long only, 24 are short only, and 43 are long short. So we're getting some really interesting information out of this beyond just the traditional old kind of number of owners. We're also looking at average portfolio allocation now. So look, 0.41% doesn't seem like a lot, but a lot of these companies, a lot of funds have 1,000 positions. And so, what's important is to look at the change over the course of time. So in the last quarter, what we've seen is that this average portfolio allocation has actually increased by 10%. So this is interesting because, it's real money, right? These portfolios they're increasing their allocation to Zoom over the last quarter. This kind of stuff, looking at the long positions and seeing the actual shares, is interesting to me. But the real interesting stuff is the portfolio allocation, because that means that portfolios and fund managers and asset managers are choosing Zoom over some other fund. They're reducing their allocation somewhere else, and they're increasing their allocations here. It's also interesting to see how many new owners there are. And if you think about it, if you took the total number of changes in owners and total number of average allocation, those two factors would be really interesting indicators to determine the overall allocation. And so what we did was we actually built a model around that, and that's what the ownership accumulation score is. So we look at the actual owner count, the change in owners over the course of a quarter. We look at the average allocation. We look at the change in the allocation, and we put them all together into a score between 1 and 100, and then rank them all. So out of 22,000 stocks that we have, Zoom ranks number 77. So 50 should be around average. So that's kind of how we kind of break this down. This is a really powerful number for determining overall institutional sentiment. Okay, and we break it down for you in just a real nice snapshot. Okay, you can also see the put call ratios here. So in 13F filings, people have to funds have to disclose puts, and they have to disclose their calls. You can take those and combine them and determine if something has a higher put ratio than a call ratio, then that's a negative sentiment. If something has a higher call ratio than a puts, then it's a positive sentiment. And then you can actually see the transactions down here. Okay, so the question was about funds flow earlier, and I want to talk about that. So if you are an international investor, if you have an opportunity to invest internationally, and I think most people do, I have an E-Trade account. E-Trade allows me to invest the United States and Canada, the UK, Japan, and so forth. And what I have found, I've been investing in international stocks for over 10 years. What I find is that there's oftentimes a lot of really great opportunities in these international stocks that should be examined. And so what we did is we started looking at overall ownership of these kind of international stocks. I call them international, but if you're if you're domiciled somewhere else, then it's not international to you. Excuse me. So what we've done is we've taken this ownership score and we've looked at every company in the world that we have access, that we have data on, and we've ranked them all. So what percentage is considered a high for institutional ownership? So the numbers, the score ranges from 0 to 100. So 50 should be in the middle, 100 should be the best, the most accumulation, and 0 should be the worst. And in this case, what we've done here is we've ranked this from 0 to 100. You can see here that Skillsoft right now went from 10 owners last quarter to 85 owners, and the allocation increased significantly as well. So some of these, so this if you have like the entire world at your kind of brokerage, then you can start here and just kind of go through this and see like which companies are being accumulated. Here's a Canadian company. This is Gulfport Energy, is all the same company, but it's listed on a couple different exchanges. So keep that in mind. Great Britain, Switzerland, Germany, and the United States. Here's a German company. Here's an ETF. Where did I see the ETF? So iShares Global Financials ETF. So what does that tell you? This is interesting as well. You can actually look at, you can actually deduce some macro factors from this. If investments, if investment in the iShares Global Financials went from 63 to 258, then you might deduce that funds believe that global financials are going to do well in the coming year. Okay, so I think this is really kind of interesting here. I look at this, I look at the ETFs that are in this list to kind of get a sense of what institutions think is hot in regards to my investing strategies, and in terms of the macro environment as well. So global carbon ETF has got a big increase in allocation. Europe, and so forth. Okay, I hope this is interesting to you. Put a lot of work into this. If you don't have the world at your brokerage, you can actually look at this on a specific, on a country specific basis. So here's the US. I'm not quite sure why that did that. Here is Australia. So you can see kind of what companies are doing well in Australia. Here is Hong Kong, Canada, and so forth. And actually, you can look at any country in the world just by putting in the country code here. So it's fintel.io/SO, and then just pick your country code. I could put in, I think this is, let's see what country this is, Austria. All right. And it will give you all of the countries. All right. Questions so far about this? All right, let's keep going then. There was another one. The question about the Canada short squeeze data. Yes, the comment was, when I look at it, percentage shortage is very low for each stock. And you're right. What we have found is that the actual percent shortage in each stock is actually very low for Canada and Australia and Hong Kong. And I think that just means that it's just, you know, the markets, these other markets besides the US, there doesn't seem to be as much short activity in them. So whereas if you look in the United States, you'll see short interest over float, you know, in the 37% and 12% and so forth. It's pretty significant. You just don't see that in a lot of these other markets. Okay. And that just means that I don't think that the short squeezes are as likely there. But I think that there's still a very interesting perspective on using short interest over float as a kind of a sentiment indicator. You're still seeing high borrow fee rates over here. For example, here's Canada, here's a 29% borrow fee rate, which means that the cost to borrow these shares to short them is very expensive still. But the short interest overflow just isn't on the same magnitude as what you see in the United States. So let's talk about short interest and short squeezes since we're here. The short squeeze leaderboard, it's right here. This basically shows you all of the companies that we believe are the most likely to squeeze in the next, period of time. We built this based on observations, right? It's really hard to backtest a strategy because there's only really been a few major short squeezes in history. There was Volkswagen, of course, there was the GME, but beyond that, trying to find there was AMC that had like a little mini squeeze a couple months ago, but I'm not certain that it was a short squeeze or a gamma squeeze. So it's hard to backtest this kind of stuff. But you can actually look at what happened to GameStop and AMC, and we did that, and what we found out was that it had a high interest sort of percentage of float, it had a high borrow fee rate, and it had a lot of volume, and and the price had gone up quite significantly. And so based on those observations, we built this model that looks at those kind of predecessors to the squeeze and tries to find companies that are getting kind of set up for that, right? So obviously there's no guarantee that any of these companies are going to squeeze, but these are setups, okay? So if this is what you're trying to do, if you're trying to bet on a short squeeze, then this is kind of where you would start. And obviously what you're trying to do is you're trying to find a company that's going to have really good news behind it, rather than a company that's just kind of up on no news. Because if it's got good news and it's going to continue to go up, and it's going to continue to get more volume, and it's going to continue to get more price action, and as long as the borrow fee rate stays high and the short interest over float stays high, then the likelihood of a squeeze is going to get higher and higher and higher. That's kind of my perspective on this. I personally don't think that betting on short squeezes is going to provide consistent returns because, again, there's only been a few in history, but this is something that a lot of people look at. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that there are oftentimes mini squeezes, and since this is and I say mini squeeze, but really it's I would be hard pressed to call it a squeeze, because what we're just seeing here is we're seeing price action, right? The price action, which is a standard part of the market. People piling into thinly traded stocks. Some of these are $40 million in market cap, and it drives the price up. I wouldn't call that a squeeze because there's no evidence that anybody had a margin call. There's no evidence that any short seller had to cover the shares and so forth. So calling it a squeeze is probably incorrect, but we do see we do see the price action here. Okay, questions about this? I see 3 new messages here. Okay. Okay, so what is your short percentage in real-time daily? So we get this. So the short interest is published. Let me go to the page here. Let me go look at this page here, and I'll just kind of walk you through this. This is the short interest here. So here's the score. The short interest. Let me go down to the short interest. Okay, we get short interest from the exchanges. Short interest is published every 2 weeks, more or less, with a small lag. So you can see the last time we got data was for 9/15. The next time we're going to get data is going to be for 9/30, and it should be in a couple of days. It's usually around the 10th of the month, so it's going to be here any minute now. So that's the data. That's kind of the numerator for the short interest over float. We get updated float every day, but it doesn't change every day. So for example, the float might not change for a quarter or 2 quarters or 3 quarters. The float might change if there's a secondary offering. So even though we get it every day, it doesn't always change every day. So the question is, the short percentage is updated daily, but it changes rarely. It's going to change minimally once every 2 weeks, and possibly more than that, because that's when the shortages comes in. I hope that answers your question. What is a high borrow fee rate? Well, a borrow fee rate is an annual percentage rate. So, the borrow fee rate this is 65% APR. So imagine if you're buying a house or a credit card, right? So work backwards from there. If you go look at, let's take a look at a couple other companies. What is the borrow fee rate for Apple? It's going to be 0.25%, right? That's really low. I think if you go look around at most companies that are not highly shorted, you're going to find that the borrow fee rate is well below 1%. Okay. And that's kind of what I've seen. Any kind of blue chip company that is stable and not troubled, you're going to find a borrow fee rate that's really low. Even in the Canadian companies that we were looking at, the borrow fee rates were down below 2% in general. But this is what causes, and this is what I'll tell you what causes a short squeeze, right? Short sellers go out and they borrow shares to short, and then they have a loan from their broker, and let's say they've put 20% of their overall assets under management into this loan to borrow shares to short, and the price goes up. The price goes up because people start piling in. So what happens is that loan to value that they have with their broker starts going from 20% to 30% to 40%, and the broker says, hey, you're kind of overextended. You need to buy some shares back and lower that loan to value ratio. And so the broker has to then go, or the short seller has to go out and buy those shares on the open market to cover their loan. So what can cause that loan to value go up? It can be the number of shares, it can be the price, and it can also be the borrow fee rate, which causes the it to be expensive. Okay, so that's what causes a short squeeze. Now people have this idea that this days to cover means that they have to cover in 0.07 days. No, that's not what that means. What it means is if every short share had to be covered based on the current volume, it would take them 0.07 days. So this is just a short interest divided by the volume. It used to be an indicator that would indicate a potential short squeeze. If you had a high days to cover, people used to look at this as being a short squeeze candidate. But I don't believe it to be true anymore, because I went and looked at what happened to GameStop back in February, and the days to cover was low because the volume was so high. So we put it here for historical purposes, but it's not really all that useful for predicting a short squeeze. People think that it means that shorts have to cover in a day and a day and a half, but that's not what it means at all. It means if they all had to cover, if they all got margin calls at the same time, it would take them this long to buy every share in the current volume to cover their shares. That's what that means. Okay, so let's keep going. Questions so far? So let's keep talking about for the put call ratios. So the put call ratios comes from institutional filings. It comes from the 13F filings, and it is lagged. It is 45 days lagged. And so, yes, there is a delay, but it is interesting because institutions don't typically churn their portfolios all that much. And so even though the data is very lagged, it can give you a sense of what institutions believe to be their sentiment for the next quarter or two. Okay, so I use it as a kind of an interesting marker because it's interesting, right? It's just another way to look at overall sentiment. Okay, so let me go back here, take a look at this. Any more questions? Let's see. All right, let's keep going then. It's 12:35. Okay, we got more stuff to cover. One of the things that I think is really important that a lot of people don't look at very much, and I wish people did, was the insider data that we have. If you take a look at now, insiders, if you're not familiar with them, they're basically officers. They are board members, officers being the CEO or VP. They're board members, or they're 10% holders. In some cases, they could be all three. So Mark Zuckerberg is an officer. He's a board member. He's also a 10% investor in Facebook. But when So you look at their trading, right? It's not illegal for them to trade and shares in their own companies, but it's illegal for them to trade if they're in possession of material, non-public information. So if they know that they're going to miss their earnings this quarter, then they can't sell shares because that would be illegal because they would be in possession of material, non-public information. But if they believe that the company's going to do well in general because they have a sense of what the market looks like and they have a sense of what activities they're doing and they believe that, you know, then they can go out and they can buy shares if they like, and that's not illegal. So it turns out, if you couldn't believe this, that insiders tend to outperform the market in general when buying shares of their own companies. So we have a whole lot of information in here about insiders, and so we have this thing called the insider accumulation score. Insiders, okay. So 13,000 companies we're tracking. Snap is one of the lowest scores, which suggests to you that they're not accumulating, they're actually dispersing. So you can see here that the net number of insiders buying is -9. That means that either 0 bought and 9 sold, or 9 insiders bought and 18 of them sold. So we basically subtract the number of insiders that we're buying from the number of insiders that are selling to find the net. And then this rank is one of the lowest there is. So a huge, very high number of insiders selling here. And then you can look at the percent of the float that was bought or sold by the insiders as well, also very negative. So if I go down here, and we can probably see a bunch of shares here. So the CEO and others are selling shares, selling a lot of shares constantly. And so that's, basically, do you want to be buying shares of Snapchat if everybody's selling? Now, these are obviously, this is even Evan, and this is part of a plan, and obviously, like the CEOs, they have a lot of, they sell a lot, but if it was just him, it would be one thing, but this is nine people selling. Now, let's take a look at some other ways to look at this. This is kind of, if you have a company in mind that you want to look at, you can look at this kind of data and see specifically what's going on with the company. But if you don't have a company in mind, you're trying to look for ideas, then you can go to this kind of screens that we have here. So, like, check this out. This is basically looking at the last 90 days, the significant buying activity. I'm going to blow this up a little bit more. What we do is we look at that same kind of number. We look at the net insider buyers. So if you have a lot of different people that are buying at the same time, then that's significant, because that means they all have come to the conclusion that perhaps this is a good idea to buy the shares in the company. We look at the total net dollar volume that they bought, and we look at the percentage of the float. Okay, so these are all kind of significant numbers here. And look, I'll be honest, the insider data, insider filings are really dirty. Like, the data is really not, it's very, it's just got a lot of errors, right? Sometimes they'll file duplicates, they get the numbers wrong. We try to clean this stuff up as much as we can, but you have to really look into this when you're looking at this. But for a starting point, this is a really great list of companies to look at where you have a really high degree of insider sentiment. Now, if you're looking for a strategy or a process or something, or a way to, to beat the market, this is probably the number one way to do it right here, just to start with this list and kind of work from there. If I go click in here and I look at the Rally Bio, I can see here that 5 insiders bought. Let me dial this back a little bit. There's a lot of insiders that are buying, and they're buying a lot of shares. Here's 153,000 shares this guy bought on the open market. He purchased this on the open market, and he paid $13 a share for a cost of, $2 million. So I'm sorry, it wasn't cost $2 million. There's 2 million shares remaining. So, like, this stuff is significant. Can we see the total number of short shares available? Yeah, I mean, if you go back to the short interest page, and you go look at, you can see the total short shares available. You go down here. I'm not sure I understand that question. Short shares available. This is the short shares available at Interactive Brokers. And then if you go down here, we subtract out the float from the short interest to find that there's 414 million non-shorted shares out there on the market. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of what that is. But let's get back to the insider trading here. Okay, good question. We're going to transition over here to the Workbench in a couple seconds here. We talked about ownership data. We talked about insiders. We talked about short interest. We've also got filing data. So I've got all kinds of SEC filings. This is really important stuff. I highly recommend you stay on top of these SEC filings. Since the question came up on the Workbench, I'm going to jump to the Workbench because this is something we're really proud of. So we've had this stock screener. This is the third iteration of the stock screener that we've got here. And basically this allows us to create, we created a query language that allows you to do, it's kind of like SQL, if you're familiar with that. Basically you can say things like, let me pick my country, let me get rid of my exchange. I can make this, Canada, I can make this the UK, I can make this Hong Kong, so forth. Pick the price, make sure it's above the trend, and then add some, balance sheet stuff here and get my results. And it will churn through. Actually, let me get rid of the Hong Kong, make this US. It will churn through and spit out all the results for what I'm looking for. Okay. So then the question was, can I sort on Workbench by insider accumulation score? The answer is yes. If I wanted to go in here and I wanted to say country equals US, and I want to say insider, I don't remember what it is, so I'm going to hit Control Space. Okay, Control Space on a Mac. Insider score is greater than 90. Okay, so here they are. Now the question was, can I sort on them? Now, the answer to your question is yes, you can do this. You can say order by insider score descending, but what I will tell you is that I just found a bug in this, and it's not going to return anything, I don't believe. So this should work within a couple days, but it doesn't. Oh, it does work. Look at that. Okay, so yes, the answer to your question is yes, you can sort on the Workbench by insider accumulation score, and this is how you do it. I'm so sorry. Okay. Any other? So look at this Workbench here. Look at all the stuff you can do. You can say price is greater than 1, market cap is greater than 100 million, so forth. You've got your countries. We've got more countries than these, actually. You can put Boolean operations in here. You can put parentheses. Here's how you can order. Okay, your ordering results. You can limit them. So if I wanted to say limit top 10, I could do this. There's I can go back in time. I can say things like country equals US, price is greater than price 1 month ago. Okay, pretty awesome stuff. Okay, oh, what's wrong? Oh, US. All right, I have to take a look at that. Anyway, so and you can create some pretty extensive screens here. You can also look at the full list of screener terms is right here, and we've got accounting data, we've got ownership data, we've got growth, we've got cash return on invested capital, we've got cost of sales, we've got debt, we have insider trading data. Let's see, here's all the insider trading terms. We've got ownership data as well. So there's a ton of stuff in here, and it's got a bit of a learning curve because it's a complex query language and not point and click. But you'll find is that it's actually really powerful, and it's going to allow you to do a lot of things that you can't do with other stock screeners. Questions about that so far? It's 12:46 my time. I really wish you guys would take a look at this insider trading data. Let me show you something else here that's interesting. It's talking about these insiders. I went through, and I went and I looked at all these trades that these guys made. These guys go out and they make a trade. This guy made a trade on August 2nd. He bought 576,000 shares for $13 a share for $7.85 million. That was just a couple days ago. This is a terrible example. But no, here's one. Viking Global Investors. That's from 7 days ago. Let me take a look at this. Hang on a second. Screens, most profitable insiders. Let's take a look at this guy. Jason Edelman. Let's take a look at Jason Edelman. This guy, let me take a look at this guy. Like I said, a lot of this data is dirty, so you have to really look at this carefully. So this guy, on September 13th, 2019, he bought 1,000 shares at $3.65, and 700 days later, this is also not a great example, the price went up to $31. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're tracking the returns on each of these trades. All right, and you can go take a look at all these guys, but we track the returns on all these trades. And then what we do is we roll them up to find the guys, the insiders that are the most profitable, the ones that could show consistent returns time after time after time. So Michael Korenko made 7 trades. His returns are 584%. So, this is kind of interesting. And so if you go look into here, you can find out that if this person makes a trade again, or if this person is continuing to do that work, then it's, to me, I think this is really valuable stuff, because it gives you some insights into who's doing well and what people are buying, which of these insiders are outperforming the market, because that's really what we're trying to find here. Questions so far? Any more questions about this insider data? Again, I would really recommend you guys take a look at this insider buying activity. We also have officer buying. So the officer buying is a little bit different. As I mentioned to you before, insiders can consist of officers. These are employees of the company. They can consist of board members, and they can consist of 10% owners. So what I have discovered, what I've determined, is that 10% owners are oftentimes hedge funds. Okay, and so they're interesting, but most of the time that it's not their own money. They're investing other people's money, OPM, right? I've also found out that board members are typically those same hedge funds, right? So you got a board member and a 10% owner, oftentimes investing somebody else's money. But the one category of insider that seems to consistently invest their own money is officers. So if you remove the 10% owners and the board members from consideration here, and you just look at the officer buying, what I think you find is an even more pure kind of metric of sentiment here. And so, look, here we have officer buying here, and what we're looking at here is the number of buyers. And if you just look at officers that are buying the last 90 days, you're going to find a lot of zeros. And so we look for the last year, because what we find is that a lot of officers will buy something, and it might take a year to pan out. So if you're a patient investor, then this is probably a better strategy for you. You have to be a patient investor here. But here we have situations where 4 different officers bought shares in the last year, and the dollar volume was $5.8 million. The average purchase price was $7. Okay, and the current price is $2.90. So $2.90. So these 4 officers put $5.8 million into this company, and the share price has dropped 64%. Now, do you think that they're going to be working hard to try to get that price back up? I think the answer is yes. And so this to me, I think, these are all really interesting companies to look at in regards to if you're looking for something interesting, you're looking for something that you've got a kind of a longer term perspective, then this list here is interesting to me. I haven't heard any different questions from anybody in a while, and I'm pretty much covered all the top stuff that I wanted to cover. So if I don't hear anything else from anybody and no more questions, I'll probably start to I'll think about this for a little bit more, and I'll try to probably kind of shut it down here. If you're interested in seeing like the overview, we've got an overview page here that talks about kind of macro level insider buying and selling. So companies with both insider selling, buying and selling. We've got latest transactions, and then we've got kind of like significant buying and selling for the last week. Okay. I use EMA as a buy signal. How can I create a query to know when the EMA 20-day EMA just crosses 200-day EMA? I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know why is I would say that using the EMA 20 days greater than EMA 200 days is the answer, but you're telling me it's not what you're looking for. So I don't know what the answer is. If you can explain to me why it's not what you're looking for, then I can probably answer your question better. There's another question about options flow data. When will options flow data be available? I don't know the answer to that either. Probably it won't be available this month. It won't be available next month. If it's going to be available, probably it would be at least 2 or 3 months away for that, because it's a lot of work and it's a lot of research. But we're looking into that, but not probably in the next 2 or 3 months. Fund Flow US is giving me an error. Yes, Fund Flow US is giving me an error as well, and so I will take a look at that once we get off the call. Oh, because it doesn't tell you exactly when it crosses the EMA 200 line. So yeah, so basically something like this maybe. Actually, I'm going to have to think about that. I'll get back to you. We're going to do another webinar in 1 week exactly. I do a stock screening and Workbench webinar every month as well. So it's going to be at the exact same time as this time next week. So bring your question about the stock screening, the EMA, to that webinar, and I will have researched it by then, and I will be able to answer your question then. So I'll give you that. The question is will scanner results be available through the API at some point? It's a good idea. I think we'll look at it. It shouldn't be a whole lot of work, but I think the answer is yes. Some people have asked about the save screen. In the old stock screener, this is version 3. In the stock screener 2.0, which is this advanced screener, we have the ability to save a screen, and then we'll run that screen every day, and you can see the results. Examples of that are like right here, for example. We don't have the ability to save kind of Workbench strategies yet, but we're working on that. That's actually in development right now. So once we have that enabled, you'll be able to save your strategy, and then we'll run that every day. And then we're also creating a way where you'll get an email alert with all the new results on a daily basis. If you want, you can subscribe to email alerts for your strategies. And then the last question here is this webinar going to be posted on YouTube? Yes, the answer is yes. We post them all on YouTube. You can go to Google, or you can go to YouTube itself and do a search for Fintel webinar, and that will be, you'll see all the old ones. They're a lot like these ones, although they're getting better. But you should see the stock screening webinar I did last month, and then kind of other stuff as well. And then occasionally I'll jump in and I'll do kind of like a deep dive into a company that's in the news. So, and it will go up probably by the end of this day. Once we're finished here, I will process the video and kind of do some edits on it, and then upload it to YouTube within probably by the end of the day, within 24 hours. Okay, any more questions? No questions? All right. Look, everybody, thank you so much. I'm really glad to have you guys on board here. I always appreciate the questions. I appreciate connecting with with other people. And I like sharing kind of the stuff that we're working on. This is really helpful. The feedback is really, really helpful as well. Don't forget that in the bottom of every page is a big question mark and a circle. And you can click on that and we will respond. We've been growing our customer service team, so I know that we've sometimes not been as responsive in the past, but we should be able to get your questions answered within 24 hours now, I think, at this point in time. And I think what you'll be seeing also is more great content, more webinars, more YouTube videos about how to use Fintel. So go to the YouTube channel and subscribe, and you'll get notified anytime we upload something new. Okay, great. So thanks so much for everything. Again, my name is Wilton, and I'm always here, and hope to see you guys around sometime. Thanks so much.